Welcome to TYT Sports, everybody. Jason and Francis with you here. Charles Barkley will be our first topic of discussion, and it's in regards to him calling the NBA's basketball product this year awful and saying there's really only 5 teams that make for compelling games to watch. Mike in the Morning has more from Charles Barkley.
But a couple of the power teams could change next year and not be as powerful and maybe open the door for Cleveland unless it's still Golden State?
Well, I think that people are overreacting. I think Cleveland still has a chance of winning the championship. Listen, Golden State, first of all, I want to thank the Golden State Warriors because it's been very awful basketball this year. Awful. I mean, just bad. You know, if you think about it, and like I say, I'm not no old guy hating, but unless Golden State is playing the Clippers, the Cavs, Oklahoma City, or the Spurs, I'm not going to watch a full NBA basketball. It's not very good basketball. And I love basketball, but there's only a couple games that are, there's probably 5 games that are watching top to bottom. The rest of the games aren't worth watching top to bottom. But it's going to be a very interesting summer. I hope Kevin Durant stays in Oklahoma City. I told you, in my 30 years in the NBA, LeBron going back to Cleveland's probably the best story. If he could bring a championship to Cleveland, it would be amazing. And I root for the Cavaliers just for that fact. LeBron going back to Cleveland is one of the great stories in sports history. But it's going to be a very interesting thing because we got to get more competitive balance because, you guys, y'all job and our job is to promote the NBA. But we want it to be competitive. We don't want to have four good teams. I want people in Milwaukee. I want people in Philly. I want people in Boston. I want to see competitive games. And right now, we're not getting that. And so there's going to be a very interesting summer in the NBA.
Francis, you agree? Disagree with Barkley's points?
I agree with his point about Golden State and his words of thanks towards them. But nonetheless, whoever Golden State are playing, I'm watching. And we talked about this. I think both of us combined have watched every single Golden State game this season. But there is something to be said about the NBA. I talked to you about this. This is no secret. I can't watch every single NBA game. The season's too long. There's far too many games. I've said this before. It's in a crazy amount of games that they play in that season in the space of time. I understand people be like, "Oh, you watch football?" It's a full year thing, and it's spread out, right? So you have it's not so many 5-6 games back to back to back.
Even in those, you can't possibly watch all of them, but you catch as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I feel that, and more often than not, because of how small of a space there is often between certain games, that teams get burnt out at times, right? So Dallas Mavericks against San Antonio Spurs a few weeks back was one of the hardest games for me to watch. Mavericks were horrendous. They were so bad, and they got demolished by a steamroll of a team, right? The Spurs are phenomenal when they get going, but it looked like the Mavs gave up at certain points. So I can understand. I think more than anything, I don't think the quality of the league is bad the way that Charles Barkley is saying. I think there's a big difference between the best teams and the worst teams. It's almost like La Liga to me. In the best teams compared to the worst, there's a huge gap in there, and you often get blowouts, but at the same time, you're still going to tune in to watch the best teams.
What I find interesting about Barkley's points is that the top-heavy league we see right now in the NBA is actually very similar to the top-heavy league we saw in the 90s when the Bulls were dominating, when Barkley's teams were pretty dominant. He played for the Sixers and the Suns. These two eras of basketball, although entirely different just because of the rules, in terms of top-heavy balance, it is more leaning towards dominant teams. The Bulls dominated when they were 72-10 in the season. The Warriors right now are dominating. They just won without Curry and Iguodala.
I know.
Their best offensive threat, and arguably, if you put Draymond Green aside, their best defensive threat against a Hawks team that's pretty good. So I agree with Barkley in the way that, yes, if the Thunder are playing, if the Clippers are playing, Spurs, Warriors, or Cavs, I'm pretty damn interested, regardless what team it really is against. Where I disagree is, I think the Celtics are a fun team to watch.
Yeah.
I think Paul George is having a great season for the Pacers. Even just the rookies in the league, Andrew Wiggins, who's a sophomore, I should say, Karl Anthony Towns and the Timberwolves. No, I don't sit at home and watch the Timberwolves versus the Nets like it's must-watch TV.
Yeah.
But I'll tune into the game wraps, and I'll tune into the 15-minute game condensed versions of those games. It just depends on the fan. I just thought it was interesting because Barkley's era isn't too much different. The Raptors, of course, too. Kyle Lowry has turned around everything that I used to criticize him for, and most people who watch the NBA, that he couldn't play in the second half. He just won Eastern Conference Player of the Week.
Yeah.
They might be enough to, and they might take down the Cavs for the #1 overall seed. Maybe. We don't know, but that could happen. So here's another interesting part of this story, right? NBA ratings are actually down, even though the Warriors have this amazing success. But how is the NBA thriving? Well, it's not by old people tuning in on cable.
Yeah.
Social media.
Yeah, of course.
And if you had to pick, I mean, I'm pretty much teeing this one up for you, Francis. What do you think? Which league do you think is the most popular on social media? The American sports. Hockey,
NBA.
baseball, yeah, okay.
And it's big, and because they're very marketable, and you're mentioning that, and they're up to date with social media, right? So like back in the time when Michael Jordan in that era, you wouldn't be getting 30-second vines of Steph Curry's game-winning shot.
We would get 30-second vines of Jordan knocking out Steve Kerr in practice.
But that would be great still to see. I think that you take that era and you bring it today, and it would be like lightning match, right? It would be huge.
I've made this point a couple times. Jordan would be hated in today's NBA. He was hated for many reasons when he played, but he would be a villain. The media would paint this guy in a much different light than they did compared to the 90s with social media. So we have 3, I believe, quotes, which I believe all come from either the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. This one from the Wall Street Journal. So this is a little bit dated, but it does carry through most of this season's theme. Through last week, as of December 21st, 2015, as I put in there, the average audience for TNT's national games is down 8.2% from 2014, while ESPN's national games are down 5.6%. Both cable networks also saw early season losses in the valuable demographic of adults 18 to 49, with TNT off by 12.5% and ESPN down 4.5% through Thursday. But here, that's the ratings. That's cable. Let's move over to social media, because on Facebook and Twitter, they dominate. The NBA's more than 28 million likes on its Facebook page is more than double the NFL's 13 million, nearly 4.5 times that of Major League Baseball's following, and 7 times that of the National Hockey League. This is compared to football. Football, American football, which is easily the most dominated cable sport and maybe the most dominated cable show in our country, right? Also, of course, on Twitter, the results are similar. The NBA's handle has more than 19.5 million followers. Francis, you're close. You're almost at 19.5.
Close.
The NFL comes in a close second with 16 million, MLB fourth in NBA's followers with 5.5-ish million, and the NHL 4.36 million followers. So I think a lot of this comes down to how we consume content, which a lot of it is through highlights, through Twitter, through media, through memes and fun tweets and reaction.
Are you telling me that success can be measured other than just simple cable ratings? Is that something you're telling me in this modern day and age?
I might be telling you
Holy
that.
jeez, is that how we're in a job?
That's possibly true.
Right? And that is true, because we consume content in completely different ways. But I wanted to go back to what you said, which was probably the most valid point, I think, of all this, is like, we might not want to watch a game between the 76ers and the Timberwolves, right? But we do want to see Anthony Davis, and we do want to see individual talent. The NBA does a great job of portraying individual talent as well as the teams, right? You get rare, I would say, athletes in specific sports that carry the weight of their team, because still I'm thinking I want to watch Manchester United. I'm not thinking I want to watch Anthony Martial or the specific players. Right. But then you get the Messi scenario where I want to watch Messi. But in the NBA, every single team has an individual like that you want to go in and tune into, and they do a great job of packaging that. I will simply watch teams like Minnesota,
with Davis,
and I'll watch the Pelicans with Davis, and I'll watch Julia Okafor. I watch these games just to see these new, and because one thing is because they're brought up in front of your eyes, right? They're brought up through the college system, and they're portrayed to you, so you want to follow them. So even if the games as a whole aren't as enjoyable, you still watch and follow to see how Andrew Wiggins is performing in his career. It's still something that's always going to be relatable.
The other aspect, and I think you can attest to this, so correct me if I'm wrong, of all the American sports, I think the NBA is actually the only one that has any kind of global prominence, right? You mentioned you have friends in Glasgow that talk about Steph Curry, or before that, Kobe Bryant. We obviously know in the Asian countries, Kobe Bryant is a megastar, right? So the global appeal has a huge impact on social media, because while the NBA, the likes of LeBron James, has the most Twitter following and social media following, it's like a minute percentage compared to Ronaldo, who's got 200 million total social media following.
Biggest followed
And
player,
it's not, but the other great thing too, we see Steph Curry tweeting things at Lionel Messi, and Lionel Messi sending jerseys over to Steph Curry. So that impact alone, I think for a lot of it, the ratings have always been, it's always been a ratings game. And we're in a different type of metric when it comes to ratings. YouTube, digital media, and how the NBA is taking advantage of putting highlights on YouTube, putting vines and highlights, stuff like, okay, to clarify even more, last point I would make is the NBA on TNT, that show, which I think is great, it's fun, they always go to Twitter.
Yeah.
For the memes, they make memes of Chuck eating donuts and Charles Barkley,
Shaq doing things.
Shaq tripping over the wires and that kind of stuff, which I think is great for the NBA.